of the 2015-16 academic year Democracy Roundtables. For those who have not been to the party previously, the Democracy Roundtables are designed to be a more informal event. There are often talks on campus. We sponsor talks, bring in guests, and faculty give talks, which are long and important and full of detail. And at the end we applaud, and then ask a few questions, and then maybe take them out to dinner. The point of the Democracy Roundtables is to have more of an engaged discussion. We shoot for about 12 people in the room. Sometimes we have a little more, sometimes a little less. But the point is to hear from a member of the community here at Penn State, or the larger community of scholars of which we are a part. Maybe hear an idea, maybe hear a proposition. In this case, we're going to hear some ideas from a brand new book. It's Chris Beem's third book, as well as two that he has edited, on democratic humility, appropriate to the title of the talk. Chris, for those who don't know, is the managing director of the McCourtney Institute for Democracy, where he has been since October, or Rocktober if you prefer. He had spent a decade at the Johnson Foundation doing all kinds of things, including setting up speakers like this and organizing large conferences on a variety of topics, many relating to elections and in particular youth voting, which is an ongoing concern of Chris's. His master's degrees are in political science and religious study, and he has a PhD in ethics and society from the University of Chicago. It's been my pleasure to be working with Chris since October, as I know other colleagues in the room feel the same, and I'm delighted to give you a chance to kind of take the front of the room and share some of your own ideas. Chris Beem, everybody.
All right, try to live up to that. We'll see. So, because of my work at Wingspread, I was never a big fan of PowerPoint, and I never really was great at using it. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, all right, so, wow, I don't know why would that happen.
There's an X on the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
very sure.
Yeah. All right, so, okay, thank you, okay. All right, so far so good, huh guys?
One would think this computer was ready.
Yeah, we're recording, you know.
Yeah, no. All right, anyway, all right, so
I'll manage that.
I'm hoping that it goes away.
You talk, I'll do your
All right, okay. So, no, thank you all for coming. I know it's getting close to the end of the semester, so time is kind of less fluid than it might have been before, so I appreciate, your time. Maybe we can all come up here and work on that. All right, so I also know that some of you don't know who I am, and you might be wondering, who is this guy and what's he doing? So I figured it would be a good opportunity to talk to you in front of you, and also I still think it's that I'm right, and so I want people to hear about the book. So anyway, so the title is "What is Democratic Humility and Is It a Good Thing?" And judging by the title, you can safely assume that the answer is yes. But I want to start by presenting the alternative point of view. And behind there is a picture of David Hume.
Oh, he's getting confused.
And maybe there's something ironically appropriate about that. I don't know. But anyway, I think there is an opinion about humility that thinks that it's not a very good thing, that it encourages a kind of self-loathing, that it can be used and has been used as a means of oppression, that it brings inordinate attention to body image and our faults, and so that it's a relic of a more benighted age. They're not really all that important. Maybe we just kind of, there's a couple that are really cool though. Anyway, we'll just see what happens. So anyway, David Hume, probably the most important figure of the Scottish Enlightenment, historian, ethicist.
Michael, maybe.
Sorry about that.
It's not happening, huh?
Does
We have problems.
Does anybody have a
We're supposed to
laptop
fix
handy?
it.
Because we could plug the laptop
Yeah, we
in.
can plug the laptop in.
But we
Well,
don't.
you know what? They're just. You know what? Honestly, I can just talk through them.
Yeah, why-
Because it doesn't come naturally to me anyway to do this, and you'll just have to take my word for the really cool ones. Anyway, all right. So, David Hume. Let's get rid of that. So David Hume is this skeptic and a utilitarian. He was the one who awakened Kant from his dogmatic slumbers. Anyway, this is what he said in his Inquiry Concerning the Principles of Morals. Where men judge of things by their natural, unprejudiced reason, without the delusive glosses of superstition and false religion, they reject humility as one of a whole train of monkish virtues. So, humility is one of them. Celibacy, fasting, penance, mortification, self-denial, silence, solitude. These are all monkish virtues. They all have a kind of Catholic tinge to them, and this is Protestant Scotland. But in any case, he thinks, Hume the utilitarian thinks, that these alleged virtues are devoid of social utility. They just don't do anything good for the society. Quote, they neither advance a man's fortune in the world, nor render him a more valuable member of society, etc., etc., etc. Not only are they not good, they're actually bad. They undermine the world. Humility and these other virtues, quote, stupefy the understanding and harden the heart, obscure the fancy, and sour the temper. We justly, therefore, transfer them to the opposite column and place them in the catalog of vices. In short, I'm going to summarize the point here. Humility makes you a drag to be around. So I am starting with a significant disagreement with Mr. Hume, and the kicker is that I'm taking my definition of humility from a monk. So Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, as you all know from Sunday school, was an abbot. He started the Cistercian order, 12th century. He's also a doctor of the church. He wrote, his most famous thing is called a book. It's actually not quite a book, but his most famous work is The 12 Steps to Pride and Humility. And those 12 steps, that actually is what Bill W. took as his template for AA. But anyway, I digress. So the seventh step of Bernard of Clairvaux's steps to humility is lucid self-awareness. So Bernard says, humility is reverence for the truth about ourselves. So that is to say, humility comes from knowing ourselves as we truly are. And so there's 11 more steps. I'm not going to go into them anymore. I just want to focus on this one. For Bernard, the more we know about ourselves, the more inappropriate pride is, and the more it's going to appear to us to be foolish vanity, and the more humility becomes an appropriate response to ourselves and our place in the world. Now, obviously, part of this is because he's Christian and he's thinking about ourselves in relationship to the Almighty, but just generally, the idea is the more you know about yourself as you truly are, the more appropriate humility is. So, understood this way, humility is not self-loathing, but it's self-awareness. It's not pathological, it's prudence. And that's really my point, that that humility is actually a sine qua non for prudence, for getting you to appropriately evaluate your own position vis-a-vis circumstances. So, and anyway, this is where I'm going. So, if I'm skiing and I look and I see two black diamonds, and I evaluate the truth of myself as a skier, that colors my decisions, and it ought to color my decisions in terms of what I do. So that's what I mean by humility. And so I think I looked through Thomas and Augustine, and I couldn't see anything that connected humility to prudence in that way. And I'm sure it's not in Aristotle. But if anybody thinks I'm wrong about that, I'd be really interested to hear it. Because I do think this kind of notion of seeing humility as a dimension of prudence is interesting, and if I was still doing ethics, I would do that. Anyway. Okay, so I do want to say just one thing. The one place I have seen this exact kind of connection is in David Brooks' most recent book, The Road to Character, which is really an interesting and brutally honest book. It's worth your time. Anyway, so in my book, I want to talk about these fundamental truths about ourselves and truths that are, by the way, empirical. There's nothing religious or theological about them. And how these truths ought to help us develop an orientation towards humility. So I'm going to argue, or I did argue, that humility is not only not a vice, it actually does make us a more valuable member of society, especially democratic society. And I want to make the case in exactly the terms that Hume presents. So what Hume says is that humility is bad, provided that, quote, men judge of things by their natural, unprejudiced reason. And that is precisely what I'm taking issue with. There ain't no such thing. Unprejudiced reason is impossible. We can't achieve it, and therefore humility has value. So I'm going to lay out this empirical case, and then try to show how that's manifested in politics. Then I'm going to go on a very short rant about contemporary political culture, and then I'm going to quickly close by talking about what it might mean to be both humble and political. Okay, so the empirical case. I don't know how much you all know about this. It's not like I am an expert by any means, but I'm not going to go down. I mean, this is going to be at the 36,000 foot level anyway, because I just don't have time. But just suffice to say, the most complicated known object in the known universe is between our ears, and so whatever I'm about to say can be nuanced or is likely to be proven wrong by future research, etc. But in any case, I had this really cool picture of the limbic system, which is a very old part of your brain, and it is shared basically without much distinction with not only every mammal, but basically every vertebrate. And so you have the hippocampus, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the amygdala. And I want to focus on the amygdala. It's this really small, like this small bulb at the end of the hippocampus. And if you draw lines through your eyes and your ears, that's basically where it is. So it's very low in your brain. Evolutionarily speaking, it's a very old part of your brain. People call it the reptilian brain. And the reason is because it basically does the same thing no matter what animal we're talking about. And it works basically the same way in us as well. So the amygdala is one of its main jobs, it's not the only job, but one of its main jobs is to respond to threats. And so what does that mean? So you probably, I'm assuming that you've all had the experience of having jumped or startled or turned around, and you never had the conscious thought to do that. Matter of fact, the only time you become consciously aware of this is after it happened. And that is called an amygdala hijack. So what happens is the amygdala gets direct signals from your sense organs. So the olfactory bulb is right next to the amygdala, but you also have direct lines from the visual cortex, the audio cortex, even touch, are all kind of directly connected to the amygdala. So all these stimuli that you're getting from throughout the world go there first. Doesn't stop there, obviously, but it goes. That's one of the first things it does. And so its job is to take in all this stimuli and to determine if there's anything out there that we need to be worried about, afraid of. So if you're conscious, your amygdala is working, and it's constantly looking for these kind of threats. It assesses every stimuli that comes in as to whether or not it's a potential danger. So when it sees this threat, it reacts. And it does that by raising your heart rate, raising your blood pressure, dilating your pupils, making you sweat. So at some point, this becomes connected to the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So it's like here, here, and here. And that is what triggers the fight or flight response. So it all starts with this little thing in your head. All right. The only thing I want to emphasize is that this is all happening before consciousness. So this comes to your amygdala before you have any awareness of what you're seeing. And often, this never rises to consciousness. So some of these things can happen, and you will never know that they happened, because it's simply below your consciousness as well. So the classic story, or the way of referencing this, is from Joseph Ledoux's book, The Emotional Brain. It's the snake-stick conundrum. So you're walking down a path, and your eyes are taking in stimuli. And so I don't want to say you're seeing, because some of this is happening without you consciously seeing it, okay? So your brain, your eyes take in the stimuli, and it sees something in the path. Is it a snake? Is it a stick? Your amygdala is meant to work fast, so it doesn't work precisely. It doesn't have time, and there actually is this really cool picture that I can't remember where I saw it, and I couldn't find it online. But it's actually the amygdala. You can show how the amygdala quote unquote sees, and it doesn't look. It looks like a out of focus picture, so it's not working precisely. It doesn't work with the same ability that our conscious brain does. But so it's not going to necessarily know if it's a snake or a stick. But it doesn't care. It sees something, and its job is to preserve you, so it makes you jump. And the reason it works is because if it had to rise up to your conscious brain, it would take milliseconds longer. And that may be just enough time for you to get bit and die and not pass on your genes. So it works better because it works fast, because it works down and dirty. Okay? So there's this cool study that Whalen and a bunch of other people did, where they showed people who were hooked up to an fMRI machine. You know what that is, with all the pretty pictures of the brain, right? And they showed them a fearful face for 33 milliseconds. An eye blink is between 0.1 and 0.4 seconds. So this is significantly faster than an eye blink. It's so fast that your conscious brain doesn't register having seen it at all. But you show this really cool thing of all these pictures of the brain scan when it's showing these 33 seconds. And the only thing in the brain that's lit up is your amygdala. So it saw it even though you didn't see it. And so then it goes right to this neutral picture, and so the conscious brain has no notion that this ever happened. So since it's not up there, I'm not even going to say any more about that. But the point is that this is a universal characteristic, not just of people, but of basically all vertebrates. And it works very well. That's why we all still have it. All right. There's nothing controversial about anything I've said so far. It's pretty much so far. It's pretty much straightforward. Okay. All right. Okay. So the amygdala works fast, but it's not precise. It's down and dirty. And as a result, it's not very good at distinguishing between threats. So if I pick up a knife and I walk towards you, that's a threat, right? Obviously. But if I just show you a knife, that's a threat. If I show you a picture of a knife, that's a threat. If I just keep saying knife, that's a threat. So your amygdala does not work very well at distinguishing what is a threat. So in the same way, the idea of threat isn't merely limited to your physical person, to my physical well-being. It's also associated with my self-image, with my well-being. So it's not just a physical thing, it's also an emotional and mental dimension as well. So, as a result, our beliefs, our values, our understanding of how the world works and our place in it are all tied up in what the amygdala decides to evaluate. So if you think that gun control is a terrible idea, or if you think that a golden retriever is the best breed of dog, or if you think that genetically modified foods are all bad, whatever those beliefs are, to the degree that you have an emotional investment in those beliefs, they are important to you and are part of your self-image. And the more important they are, the more likely any countervailing information is going to be understood by your amygdala as a threat. So, and the bigger your commitment, the more of a threat it is. So this goes for partisan points of view, it goes for religion. The more important it is to you, the more when you think about who am I and what's important to me, the more likely these ideas and beliefs are going to come up, the more likely it's going to be something that your amygdala wants to defend. All right, so because it's our self-preservation that we're talking about, we are more concerned, or at least our amygdala is more concerned, with defending the belief, defending our self-image, than it is about the truth. The truth is a higher order function. It's here in the prefrontal cortex. That's where that comes up. All of this is happening before that even gets engaged. So the role of the amygdala is not to figure out, well, gee, he makes a good point, that's right. No, it's to say, this is bad. This is bad for us. We have to reject this. We have to figure out ways to reject this. And so what your amygdala does, again, before consciousness, is it moves into the logical part of your brain and says, I need some help here. They've got some information that goes against our self-image. How do I make this go away? Why is it wrong? Figure out why I can dismiss this. And so your logical brain is working saying, well, it's a biased source, or it was taken out of context. Your brain is working on that, again, before consciousness. We're talking milliseconds, but your brain works really fast. All right, so there is no getting around this. There's no distinguishing between the brain according to gender or race or ethnicity or class, or, importantly, how smart you are. There is a difference between smart people and dumb people with respect to how their amygdala functions. Smart people are much better at coming up with impressive rationalizations for why they don't have to take it seriously. That's the difference. So anyway, so when your amygdala hears something that it doesn't like, it is motivated to come up with reasons why you don't have to take it seriously. And that's motivated reasoning. The classic example is in the history of the human race, when somebody gets a positive test result back, they don't say, well, wait a minute, maybe the test was wrong. Maybe I really do have this. Maybe I really do have cancer. Nobody says that. If they get the opposite results, they're very motivated to think twice about the legitimacy of this reasoning. Anyway, or the legitimacy of the test results. So I'm actually going to get to politics now. So I know you knew it was going to come sooner or later. So Drew Weston, this is the book. It's a really long book. I think the first half where he's talking about neuroscience is really great, but then when he starts talking about himself as a political strategist, it's not very good at all. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So anyway, he's a neurologist who's at Emory, and he took 30 men, all strong partisans, some Democrats, some Republicans. He hooked them up to an fMRI machine, and he said, he gave them two statements of Bush and Kerry that were baldly contradictory. So at this date, John Kerry said this, and at this date he said this. They weren't true, but they were precise, even, and completely plausible. Hooked them up to an fMRI machine. While they are doing this, the part of their brain that lit up was not just the amygdala, it was the part of the brain that registers distress. So when you see your candidate that you're committed to saying something contradictory, that literally causes, it's not appropriate to call it pain, because pain may require you to be conscious, but it's distress. It's distress in the same way that if it was physical pain, it would register in your brain. So your brain is like, this hurts, I want it to stop. The kicker is that once it does stop, once your brain comes up with all these reasons why you don't have to take it seriously, your brain produces dopamine. Dopamine is a pleasure chemical. It's the same chemical that's produced with food or drugs or sex. It's an incredibly powerful drug, and your brain is saying, oh, okay, that's better, okay. And it's literally rewarding itself for coming up with reasons why you don't have to take this seriously. All right. So there's, now that we have this new toy of the fMRI machine, there are literally dozens of studies that confirm all this, but I don't want to belabor the point. The point is that it is extremely hard for us to debate each other, to discuss with each other, let alone to get to the point where we can actually convince each other. And the stronger of a partisan we are, the stronger we're attached to an idea, name it, climate change, gun control, whatever it is, the more committed we are to it, the harder it is for us to ever get to the point of saying, you know what, maybe I was wrong about that, or that's a good point, or whatever. So the point is, in contrast to Mr. Hume, there really is no such thing as unprejudiced reason. There's only more or less prejudiced reason, and people who are more or less successful at drawing or mitigating the effects of this prejudiced reason, of this motivated reasoning confirmation bias. So, for reasons that will be clear in a minute, I want to draw an analogy between motivated reasoning and sin, which is a purely theological concept, right? It's actually fairly universal in all organized religions. But I'll tell you why I'm using it in a minute. The idea is that motivated reasoning is like sin in that it is universal, it's inescapable, and it diminishes our understanding of ourselves. It acknowledges us or shows us to ourselves as being less than we really want to be. We don't think we're simply just a mass of biases that are just looking for reasons to affirm them. We think we're calling it as we see it. We think we have some grasp on objective reality, and we don't like the idea that we don't. So, Reinhold Niebuhr, who's one of the guys on the subtitle, is a Christian political thinker, and he talks about sin as being a problem for society, especially for democratic society. And he talks about it in terms of pride. It was actually when I was reading this neuroscience stuff, I'm like, that sounds like Niebuhr. And I knew nobody else was going to see that connection. So, and then I started reading Niebuhr, I'm like, oh my God, it is Niebuhr. Anyway, so Niebuhr talks about how social institutions and culture can help us mitigate the effects of sin. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not going away, but you can try to control its effects. So I'm going to start talking about the contemporary political climate now. The issue with the issue that I see with our political culture right now is that these social institutions aren't working the way they used to. They aren't doing the kind of mitigating work that they used to. And the most relevant one is the media. So it's not that people in the media now are just not moral or not concerned with doing the truth. They're just following a different business model that they have to follow because of the explosion of resources. So now, not only do people not present news that causes us distress, or that causes us to have to deal with the fact that the world may be more complicated or more divergent than we think it is, but we actually have news that feeds our pleasure centers. It tells us what we want to hear. It reinforces the idea that we're in the right group, that we're the smart ones, we're the better Americans. And that pleasure makes it very powerful as a marketing technique. So it makes these people a lot of money by creating these kind of news outlets. But it just makes it harder for us to hear and to come to terms with how to deal with information that we don't like. All right, so when in Niebuhr's work, the three institutions that he talks about are government, religion, and education. And I put all my chips on education because I don't have a lot of confidence in government and politics, and I say why. But the idea that civic education is where is a good place to kind of focus on is because there's data that support that idea. if you tell people this is how your brain works, and you are inevitably going to, literally the facts of the matter, it will make us as individuals more inclined to think twice about what we're hearing. So literally just telling people this is what's happening can change your openness to thinking twice about your own opinions. So that's why I look more carefully at civic education than anything else. All right, so I'm gonna bring it in for a landing here. I just want to say one thing about what this means for democratic politics. So, you don't have to just look at Donald Trump to see that humility is not a very normal political virtue. I mean, on the contrary, to say that of all the people in the state of Pennsylvania, I'm one of 2 people that should be senator, or of all the people in the United States of America, I'm the one who should be president, or mayor, or whatever, it requires an enormous amount of pride. Not to mention the fact that there's an emotional investment that's necessary if you're going to fight politically. So there's an old saying about that a liberal is somebody who won't take their own side in an argument, right? And there's a kind of, this moves you in the same direction. If you are thinking, well, I have my own biases, and this is kind of a difficult issue, and I'm sure this person has a perspective, that is not going to get you to the barricades. It's not going to give you the emotional investment that you need to fight, let alone win politically. Okay? So, so what do we do? What is the role of humility? So, the solution is that we have to do both. We have to live out our lives in this tension and try to find some kind of balancing act. So we must be emotionally immoderate and convinced that we're the good guys, yet at the same time we must recognize at bottom it's really something of an act, that it's not true. So this is what Niebuhr says. The respective parties are bound to contest elections as if the future of the nation depended upon their victory, but they must nevertheless have a reserved conviction that this is not true. The nation will be safe in the keeping of either party. Without this reserved conviction, our democracy is in mortal danger. Whenever the followers of one political party persuade themselves that the future of the nation is not safe with the opposition in power, it becomes fairly certain that the nation's future is not safe, no matter which party rules. For such political acrimony endangers the nation's health more than any specific political policies. Now, I mean, I actually do go on to say that there's times when that's not true, when it may just be that politics is the only solution we have short of war, but most of the time that is true, and I do think it requires that kind of balancing act. Now, for Niebuhr is a Pascalian. He just follows Pascal, and if you know anything, Pascal's phrase is man is the thing you read. So we live out our existential lives in this kind of dichotomy, this kind of just unbridgeable duality. So we are both created and creator. We are both free